Sometimes when we look around the world, we could see bad news, violence, human rights abuses, wars, conflict, negative things, and it can be depressing. But there's another way to look at that sort of news, which is to look at human courage. And I do believe that courageous people who stand up against threats in order to do the right thing deserve not only credit but recognition, um, rather than just putting a focus on the perpetrators, which is obviously part of it. But I think it's important to look at the risks some people take to do the right thing. And the case I'm going to highlight here, I think, is one such example. Mexico has recently been, I don't know if shocked is the right word because political assassinations are not unheard of, but this one I think has really pushed anger to a breaking point in the state of Michoacan. Um, and by the way, to any Mexican viewers, apologies if I'm not pronouncing it correctly. I did check Google first on some of these pronunciations, so I hope I'm getting it right, but do correct me if I'm wrong. I'm just going to read out a piece from The Independent because this man basically paid with his life for standing up to criminal thugs. And I'll just say this before getting into it. Very often there's this tendency to glamorize criminals. I mean, you certainly see it in the United States in popular culture, but even if we look at the Mexican cartels, there's a lot of interest in them around the world. People should never lose sight of the fact that ultimately these people are criminals. They're not Robin Hood figures. They're not sort of noble outlaws. They are callous, cold-blooded killers. Really, no morally better than ISIS or other terrorist groups. And I think that's how they should be regarded. So no one should idolize criminals. I know how it works. When if we look at Pablo Escobar in Colombia, there's a whole culture around his legacy. And I was looking at the series Dark Tourism, the series called Dark Tourist recently by the New Zealand journalist David Farrier, who's sometimes been called a doppelganger of Louis Theroux. They do look remarkably alike. They have a similar style, etc. Anyway, he went to Colombia and he was looking at the legacy of Pablo Escobar, and he met his right-hand man. He wasn't convinced that the guy had truly reformed, but this was a guy who killed his own girlfriend in order to please his boss because he perceived her to be an informant. And he killed many, many more people. But even the police officer admitted that they took bribes, and people said that Escobar was popular in the city of Medellin because he built apartments and stuff, and it's this sort of showboating that high level criminals often engage in. Where they win over the poor, sometimes from a threat of violence, but sometimes from genuine kind of philanthropy in a perverse way. And yet there's always a caveat with organised crime. We'll protect you, but get on the wrong side of us and you die. It's So I'm always skeptical of that, but people should be under no illusion that these cartels are ruthless people. They're not heroes. To me, the heroes are people who stand up to them. And this man is one such example. I'm just going to read out the report because his wife has now taken over. Um, Quick thing before I get into that, apologies, I know I'm interrupting again, but just to give a bit more context, President Sheinbaum of Mexico has come under a lot of criticism from opponents saying she hasn't done enough about this problem with organised crime in light of this assassination. And it's not unique in Mexico, but it's almost like, a breaking point. I'm just reading this out from the Grand Pinnacle Tribune. President Claudia Sheinbaum pledges a new strategy for Michoacan, focusing on justice, economic growth and culture after the assassination of Uruguay's mayor. Sparks public outrage. That in America, of course, is no stranger to the sort of violence. In Colombia earlier this year, the presidential candidate Miguel Uribe Turbe was assassinated in Bogota. So this isn't something that's unique to Mexico. It's something that could be seen across Central and South America. Um, so if there's any more pieces here. Yeah, earlier in the year in Mexico City, A gunman shot dead, this was in May this year, a gunman shot dead the two top aides of the mayor of Mexico City, Clara Brugada, and two victims were Ximena Guzman and Jose Munoz. So they were killed. So this sort of political violence is not unheard of in Mexico, and the state of Michoacan, as I understand it, is particularly affected. So without further ado, here's a report from The Independent. Um, I think it's the fact that this man showed such courage despite the threats. He continued doing what he was doing, standing up to the cartels. So this is from The Independent. It's by Lisbeth Diaz. Wife of assassinated Mexican mayor takes over his position despite death threats after brazen murder. There's growing discontent in Michoacan over the violence plaguing the region, and there's been big protests to that effect. The wife of a mayor who was assassinated during the Day of the Dead celebrations in Mexico is assuming her husband's job after his brazen murder. Grecia Quiroz will replace her husband Carlos Manzo as mayor of Uruapan following several days of protest demanding justice for the crime. The swearing-in will take place Wednesday afternoon at the state's Congress, President Claudia Sheinbaum said Wednesday at her daily morning press conference. A hooded gunman shot and killed Manzo 40, same age as myself, Saturday night as he attended a candlelit festival in an attack that sparked national outrage, in part because of his outspoken criticism of the federal government for not doing more to fight organised crime. Moments before the shooting, Manso had given a speech in the city of 350,000 and carried around his young son in his arms dressed as a skeleton. This is, of course, a big cultural event in Mexico. Let's continue. They took the father of my children from me, but they were wrong. This isn't over, Quiroz said at a memorial service for Manso Monday. She promised to continue Manso's fight against powerful drug cartels that had become entrenched in the lucrative avocado and lime business. Carlos Bautista, leader of the independent hat movement, to which Manso belonged, told Reuters that the new mayor will be protected by at least 14 security agents. This is something that should never happen again, Bautista said of Manso's killing, adding that some of Manso's political allies have also received death threats. The Michoacan Attorney General's office did not immediately respond to a request for comment about the alleged death threats. There is growing discontent in Michoacan over the violence plaguing the region, where lemon and avocado producers have for years denounced extortion, kidnappings and killings linked to cartel violence. A leader from the local avocado sector, Bernardo Bravo, was killed in October. Manso's murder triggered a wave of violence in Michoacan, including from residents demanding justice. In the state capital, Morelia, protesters vandalized government buildings for 2 days in a row. Authorities have arrested 2 people in connection with Manso's killing and pledged to continue investigating. Sheinbaum said she also met in person with Quiroz and Manso's brother. They are quite right to demand justice and that this investigation be carried out to the end, Sheinbaum said. He criticised the president herself over this situation in his state. Incidentally, Claudia Sheinbaum apparently is pressing charges against a man who groped her at a political rally. So the security situation in Mexico is clearly still pretty serious. I particularly want to hear from Mexican viewers. What do you think about this? Is it a case of it's a particular problem to Michoacan, or is this a nationwide problem? Has President Sheinbaum got the situation under some level of control, or is this just a situation where it seems hopeless? Is it a situation that the perception of corruption is such that people don't trust the police? So that's what I'd like to hear from viewers, particularly Mexican viewers. I personally think someone like this is just that sort of courage to stand up to organised crime, knowing the threats that are involved, knowing it could cost your life, is profound. But his courage stands in contrast to their thuggery and their cardishness. Cardist because it's, they're not taking any responsibility for it. They've killed a man in cold blood in front of his family. They're just thugs. They are not. No one should idolize cartels. These are despicable, callous individuals who destroy human lives without a thought. And like I say, this does seem to be a problem that plagues a lot of Latin American countries. Now, in Italy, there were similar examples. The situation's improved a bit now, but particularly in the 70s, 80s and 90s, Italy obviously dealt with organised crime with the mafia, and I recall hearing about a judge, a young judge, who stood up to the mafia, and he ended up being assassinated. And as he prayed on the roadside, as he was bleeding to death, he actually was made a posthumous saint by the Catholic Church. But around the world, where you see organised crime, you see courageous people standing up to it, and there is a real risk with that. I mean, I think that the aspect of corruption can't be underestimated. If a police officer has a choice of taking money or getting a bullet through their head, it's obvious what they're going to choose. But then it comes to those in power. So I think President Shinbom does need to show that she is absolutely prioritizing this. I can't think of any bigger priority for Mexico. Perhaps climate change. It had serious floods earlier this year, so that's also a pressing issue. And the same issues that a lot of other countries face, rising living costs and so on. But the security situation in Mexico, I think, at least from an outsider, the perception seems to be that it's still pretty dangerous. So I want to hear from Mexican viewers. What do you think of this? I think this man was a hero, and I think that the anger in Michoacan sort of demonstrates a situation whereby people, because often there's a situation where it takes one or a few brave people to stand up and then others start to follow. Whereas initially it's like, well, we better not provoke the cartels. But this man paid with his life, so I think locals have sort of got fed up and said we're no longer going to be pushed around by these people. And in a way, that's a good thing. But they are powerful. And the aspect of political corruption and police corruption can't be underestimated. So, is there any hope to this situation? Maybe the protests will put pressure on the president to really push this as a priority. Now, I don't follow Mexican politics closely enough to make any assessment of her as a president. I know she's on the left. I think she's from the same party. Correct me if I'm wrong, as Manuel Obrador. I could be wrong about that, but yeah, what do you think? I'd particularly like to hear Mexican voices here. I'm an outsider. I don't know the sentiments within Mexico. Obviously, there is anger in Michoacan, but personally, as an outsider, I have so much respect for someone like Carlos Munoz and his wife and his supporters. The courage they're showing is in such contrast to the thugs who killed him. 2 arrests, you could be absolutely sure there will be more than 2 people behind this. So let me know your thoughts, and rest in peace, Mr. Munoz. You were a hero as far as I'm concerned.